Can you quantify just how many students are involved in this encampment, involved in the demonstrations, and overall, what is the temperament on the campus? Because you're having Jewish students say, hey, I don't feel safe at this university that I pay for, that I call my school.
Right. I mean, I definitely think in terms of climate, people have such different temperature checks on what that looks like. I think that if you were to ask many of the pro-Palestinian protesters that we speak to, what they would describe as something very peaceful, very community oriented, very much focused on, yes, it is a very visible and public demand against the university, but I think that's what they see it as, right? I think that they very explicitly see it as a student versus administration issue, right? That there is a tension with the administration that they're attempting to amend, and of course, other external people are involved in that, students, faculty, etc. But I think that's sort of where the focus for them lies. And then there are other students on campus who have been expressing to us that just the sheer nature of navigating campus, seeing the encampment, seeing the activity outside, is incredibly distressing to them. And so um, it's so interesting to see such opposing accounts of what is happening. And I think even in our reporting, you know, it's really hard to try to capture like some sort of quote middle ground, because I don't necessarily think that that quite exists. Like, I don't think that one person's characterization is wholly wrong and the other person's characterization is wholly right. I think there's a kind of a little bit of everything, right? I think that there is, at the same time, that there could be a potential for this encampment to represent for a lot of people a community space, a sort of reclamation of power in some instances, right? This idea that the university has had power over us for a long time, and now we have the most significant disruption that has happened on our campus since October 7th that is impeding the university from doing its functions, from setting up for graduation, for commencement, from doing a lot of the things that it's intending to do. Our classes have shifted online. It is clearly a very significant disruption of all activity on our campus. And so I think that is obviously intentional, but I think a lot of where that viewpoint there is that could both be true, and that there's also a community being formed at this encampment, and then it can also be true that there are characterizations from other students that they are not feeling safe. And we've heard it from also not just Jewish students and Israeli students, but also from the leaders at this campus, right? From the head of Hillel, the head of Shabbat, the head of many different organizations here that are dedicated to Jewish student life are saying the same thing. And I think, but ultimately, an interesting unifying thread in all of this is, okay, if this is all true, where are they pointing to? And it does seem that the bottom line is still when the Jewish student leaders or Jewish leaders on our campus, the rabbis, the other executives are saying, hey, this campus is not safe for students, they're often pointing to administration directly.
Isabella, you're in a really interesting position right now because not only are you a student at Columbia, you are the editor in chief of the main media covering this story around the clock. So when you look at national media compared to what you're covering, what you're seeing, what your reporters are gathering, where do you think the media is getting it wrong?
Right. I've been asked this question quite a bit, and I think overall, what I truly see is that, look, for us as student journalists, we occupy such an interesting position for ourselves where we live and eat and sleep in the same community that we report on. And that's an incredibly unique feat. And that's a feat of student journalism, but it's also local journalism, right? That's what we've adopted to be in our kind of small community. And so what I think is we have a certain historical and contextual understanding of what has been happening on our campus that is very different. When I report on the people that I report on, whether it is we're reporting on incidences that are incredibly emotional, intense, and hard to write about and report on, or it's about the community performances that were put on at the encampment, we are reporting on our peers ultimately, right? These are people that we actively engage with in dialogue beyond Spectator, that we're constantly in communication with. And I always caution against sort of it's sometimes I see my own sort of campus represented in media, and it's really hard because I see it, and I see it so closely as a student journalist. I often know what is wrong here. I truly know this place pretty inside and out, and so do many of our journalists here. At the same time, you know, as a student here, I know the people that are here. I know the scholars that I look up to and the professors who have been crucial in my shaping as a journalist, as a just a student, the friends that I have here, the peers that I have. I know the community at large. And you know what's also really important? I know a Columbia before this. And I think that is so critical to this understanding is I don't think Columbia can change like that overnight. Like I think that we are been placed in the limelight, obviously, but just in the center of something so tense for the entire world, right? How can you expect 18, 19, 20, 21 year olds to be trying to understand what is happening in such a time where not even our politicians and our national outlets understand what is happening to the fullest degree. Like we are very much processing as we're learning, as we're reporting, as it's unfolding. And so I think it's a very different angle to be an outside outlet, kind of parachuting in to some extent sometimes, to try to understand what's happening at this exact moment in time. And I also think not only with that, but as the spectator, as a campus organization, we are here no matter whether Columbia's in national news or not. And that is also really critical. We are a pillar and here for accountability and all the things that we stand for, whether or not we're in the national media or we are just reporting on sort of the day to day and the sort of normalcy that, you know, the normal student life experience or the faculty experience. And I think that is what makes our coverage obviously so much more in depth, right? We're not picking up the biggest thing that's coming out of Columbia that day. We're picking up every single thing that's coming out of Columbia that day, from the small decisions that were made, from Shafiq or the encampment or from other parties surrounding, from statements that are being made from student organizations. Of course, we might pick up almost every statement or at least as many significant statements as we can, but maybe other outlets, and reasonably so. I understand that position. I'm someone who also, you know, enjoys like media and plans to work in media. So I think that it's not even necessarily a critique of the industry at large necessarily, but rather how, just there's so many factors to this, but I think just our ability to be able to report on every single development, whether or not it is the biggest development of that day, is really important to our community and also shows that, again, we are there no matter what. As Spectator, we have always been there. We've been here since for literally over a century, right? Since 1877, the Spectator has existed. And so we have a really long legacy here of preserving the history of our student body. And we are committed to doing so in such a localized level. And I think that's what really elevates our coverage and really what I wish more so what national media could engage with is what was a Columbia before this and what is a Columbia during and what is a Columbia potentially after this.
That's